Welcome back to GRC Uncensored, everyone. It's been a minute since you've heard from Troy or TJ and I, and Kendra, of course, is too busy to show up for this particular amazing topic that you all, I'm sure, are super familiar with. But let's just kind of jump right into it, and I apologize. I'm basically going to read at you so I can provide some context, because there's a good bit of information that is still very uncertain. So I want to put out into the world what we do know and what we are going to ramble on and have some punditry conversations about. So the big deal is this month, or at least the time of recording, DoD or Department of War, or however you want to call them, announced the suspension and launched a reform task force to review the program known as CMMC. The reasoning behind that is essentially they're saying that the costs are driving the suppliers out of the defense industrial base, which in particular means small business, aerospace suppliers, technology vendors handling CUI information or unclassified information. The dynamics here are pretty straightforward. It's very similar to the conversations that we've had in the past with SOC 2 of what value does this bring, the cost involved, the time and resources involved, and it created a whole economy behind it with the whole CMMC process. Same thing is happening. There are organizations that have come up with readiness, abilities, courses, obviously third-party assessments as part of this process, and all of that for the next 60 days at least is now suspended and under review to determine what should change, if anything, for the CMMC process. So that means the self-attestation process, the stage 1, that remains in place, but within the 60-day period, there won't be a push for folks to do that third-party review. So after 60 days, that may come back into play. They may make some adjustments. But again, the main situation that we're looking at is it is not CMMC should or should not exist. It's really about providing the context and the focus, and if it is more so on the cybersecurity side or the compliance side. As we have sort of beat that topic to death, if we are leading CMMC towards just purely a compliance-driven system, but we know that people tend to check the box and go for the path of least resistance. That's just how that works. Now, if there's a shift in this system and then points it more towards cybersecurity programs, so not a point-in-time assessment, but some sort of continuous controls and operations, there's some benefit to that. The hot takes that we're seeing is all over the place, which is, of course, not necessarily why did I waste my money doing what we've done so far? It's more so, yes, anything that you've already done to improve your cybersecurity posture and your governance systems is a benefit. Maybe you're just not going to get a third-party review. Still, TBD, we have 2 months before we make that decision. And also, the government did not say very clearly that they don't care about cybersecurity anymore. They just are reviewing that the implementation in this current system needs a review because they have heard from our general community that things have been incredibly slow. So they are listening, and now they might be overcorrecting and just halting and speeding up. So I think that is the current baseline. That's where we're at. Troy, what would you like to add?
Basically, well, no, you covered it pretty well. I was impressed there, Elliot. That was much better than I would have explained it.
I woke up early and I had extra coffee.
You sound like an expert. But I will say that one thing to understand is that CMMC itself is just the assurance mechanism behind government contracting and making sure companies are meeting NIST 800-171 requirements if you have controlled unclassified information. The requirements to implement NIST 800-171 controls are still in every single contract that all these contractors and subcontractors are agreeing to. So that requirement did not go away. That is not being suspended. Those are still in contracts that companies agreed to with prime contractors. Their subs agreed with the primes, and the primes agreed with the Department of War that they signed those contracts. The other thing is, if you are a sub of a prime, it's still important to understand that a prime can still enforce and say you need to undergo a C3A certified audit from a C3PAO and get CMMC level 2 if they're giving you controlled unclassified information. So basically what this suspension is saying is that Phase 2 was supposed to go into effect in November 10th, and that was supposed to be that all the new contracts with the Department of War and primes had to have a CMMC level 2 requirement for an audit if you were getting controlled unclassified information. Now, those are also supposed to be flowed down to the subs, right? So primes are supposed to flow down those requirements to their subcontractors that they also give that CUI to. Primes with their subs they can do whatever they want, right? I mean, they could say, go implement 1,000 controls and get those audited and do what they want. It's a risk. They're trying to manage their vendor risk with that, right? So if you are a sub, you still might need to do this. So that's one thing. One, don't just like cancel your C3PAO audit, your assessment, because you still agree to a contract with a prime, and that's still in effect. That's something to consider. If you are a prime that works with the Department of War, yeah, I'll be honest, I wouldn't go through an audit right now. Wait for things to wait the 60 days. Of course, I actually think it's going to take a lot longer than 60 days. The first time I heard about CMMC and this thing started?
Probably 2001.
Close. 2019. That was the first time I heard of CMMC and what this was going to mean. There's been so many ups and downs and delays in the past 7 years with getting this thing off the ground. And they've had phase 1 and they had this self-assessment. But this actual assessor and building this assessor pool and doing all this training, it's taken a long time. It's government. I don't know how else to say it. This is actually why I haven't involved myself with government audits. It's because I just don't trust the system. I didn't want to invest the money to build and do this as a C3PAO right now. And this just kind of proves my case. I'm not comfortable with the uncertainty, so to speak, right? As you can tell, they can just spend it whenever they want and do whatever they want. And that is what it is. If I was a C3PAO right now, I'd be very, very frustrated. If I was a person that got certified to be an auditor for CMMC and went through the training and passed the test and went through the 1-year-long background check process and dealt with all that, I'd be very frustrated. I think it's par for the course, unfortunately. It's Department of War, Department of Defense, whatever we want to call them. They tend to do what they want to do when they want to do it. So that's where we're at. But none of this, like Elliot said, really stops having good cybersecurity controls and good cyber hygiene, right? I mean, that's still, right? Yeah, you hope so. I mean, that's still a requirement no matter what, right? I mean, if you're sitting here not knowing what to do, if you care about cybersecurity risk, I would at least do some type of gap assessment still. Maybe not go through the full audit, have somebody do a high-level review still, look at your controls, make sure they're kosher, make sure you're doing something. I don't think this is a get out of jail free card to do nothing and invest in nothing. That's what I would caution people to do. Yeah, if you're going through a C3PAO audit and you don't have a hard requirement right now from a prime or some other third party, I would probably hold off. There's really no reason to invest in that. But you should invest in good cybersecurity. And you still have to meet those NIST standard 171 requirements. You agree to that. If you don't meet those and you get caught with a major breach, a false claims act against you, that's no fun. So be reasonable, be practical, right? Don't ignore it, but maybe don't go all the way to, I need a C3PAO assessment done. So those are my initial thoughts. What do you think, Elliot?
Well, you're giving me flashbacks to when I was dealing with this, God knows how long ago, well before I was in startups and tech proper. I think the economics of it, that is a huge pain for the world that you specifically sit in. I think the interesting thing that we're sitting in, if I was a sub and I'm trying to make the decision, maybe even if I don't have a contract, this could be sort of the same argument that we're seeing with SOC 2, where it is sort of it maybe makes you look less risky for a prime to pull you in. So if it does move forward, even if it doesn't move forward, it's still an indicator of your investment into that ecosystem, that you're doing the right things, that you have documentation and systems that make it a little bit easier to articulate. I will say, because I've been in a contractor that was a sub or vying for contracts, in those situations, like they're not necessarily looking at that in you. I mean, like that isn't a requirement, but they're looking at like, are you a small business or like woman owned or some of these other things that allow you to actually vie for certain contracts? And then they're like, oh, by the way, you actually have to have these things too. So like it is just a weird hot mess. So I get it from like the smaller contractors that this is a little bit of a huge pain, but like they are used to this kind of thing. So if there's a little bit of a benefit where they can spend less money on like the assessment part of the equation, and if that is the outcome of whatever hold period that they're doing here, maybe they find ways to make it a little bit more accessible for those smaller contractors to get into the pool. I think that is a net positive. We've certainly seen things in the last couple of years where processes have been improved for that benefit. But again, my biggest concern out of all of this, especially with like things with CISA getting stripped to bones and some of these other organizations is just like theater at this point. Having a shell of what exists, it removes the value of it. So if we're going to do that, that fully defaults back to checking the box and compliance, and like no one on this planet needs this.
No, I agree. I mean, I do think like the outcome of this, well, I think the 60-day review is just the outcome's going to be, hey, we need more time. But that's what they're going to say at the end of this. I've never seen the Department of Defense /War do anything in 60 days. So like I said, it took 7 years just to get to Phase II almost, and we didn't, and they got delayed and suspended. So, but I do think you're right. Small business it is a burden for them. I mean, if you're only making, $1 million from the DoD, and then, hey, now we have to invest in, well, they should have been investing in cybersecurity already, but now we have to pay $50,000 for an audit. We have to buy all these new security tools that maybe we should have been having before, but we didn't. And now we're spending 10% of our revenue on this. It's like that kind of makes you not want to work with the Department of War. And so what happens with Department of War? They say, wait a second, we're losing our suppliers here, our key suppliers. Hold on. Our number one goal is national defense, not, cybersecurity is, of course, important. But if we don't have suppliers to build our weapons, to defend ourselves, we are actually worse off than having, it's like no cybersecurity controls, strong national defense.
Yep.
Good cybersecurity controls, no suppliers to build what we need to protect ourselves. It's like, that's the debate the Department of War is having. And they've obviously had some small, important suppliers say we can't, if we do this, we're going to have to, we're going to have to go out of business, or we're not going to work with you anymore. And so but that's my guess what happened. And there was enough of them that said that.
I don't know. I feel like that is the logical piece behind the equation.
Okay.
Like, is it though? Because I will say, like, I feel like the announcement came out of someone who I've seen speak at a few industry conferences, and like they have a pretty unique, non just traditional cybersecurity background too. Pretty badass to be straightforward. So like, it doesn't surprise me that someone who has not been living in government would come in and like say, this is just dog shit, for lack of better words, and bring in like a proper tech lens to him. They're like, I've lived on the other side of the fence. I know how slow these things go. We need to like streamline and optimize it. And if that is the outcome, that's a win-win for everyone. But again, like the challenge is like, are they going to do it the right way and encourage and influence controls? But like the other piece of the equation is like when people use the word military grade, it is not a good thing. So having a painful process to make it an entry point for organizations to get in to secure probably some very important things, even if it is unclassified information, like you still don't want anyone having access to where that stuff is stored, because, supply chain attacks and all that good stuff. So in my mind, I want as much pain in that process to basically remove anyone who's going to be lazy as hell that will try to get in there just because they're buying it for money. I get it. It is a business. That is how these things work. But like, if we're trying to over optimize it and reduce the systems in place that allow just small contractors to get in there without like the proper controls, that is the problem. But I don't think that is really like the logic that's coming out here. We'll obviously see in the next few months. But like personally, I'm in favor of making it painful because the burden is on those companies to get their shit together.
I understand that. Like, but however, I do think that like not all CUI is created equal.
Of course.
I mean, like, I'm not an expert in like all the different categories of CUI. It's very confusing. I don't even think the people like in the Department of Defense really understand CUI. They don't know really what CUI people have, what prime contractors, what CUI they have. They have no idea who they pass it down to, who they keep passing it down to, the flow down. But like by the time it gets to like the fifth flow down, okay, like that piece of CUI that fifth sub got potentially, like it's probably very low risk. That piece of that one, right? Like if you get like, oh, we have this one part to this huge plane that has 50,000 different parts in it. It's like, who cares? It's like, that's not going to give anybody anything if somebody gets that.
Right.
Why does that fifth sub right there have to implement all these different things if they have this one little thing that really at the end of the day by itself is nothing? Yeah. So like we in that stance, I think we have created the wrong, it's not really a risk-based approach in my opinion. I think they need to focus on the risk and understand like who are our riskiest vendors or contractors and really understand like where's the CUI, who has the CUI, and it needs to be built on that. I think just saying a blanket, you have CUI, so guess what? You're level 2. That to me, they're not going to fix the problem if that's still the case. It's just going to be the same problem, in my opinion.
So
that's a really hard place to get to, because if you can see, I'm not sure the Department of War is very organized. Internally.
No comment.
And then their primes probably aren't very organized, right? Because you remember primes have to flow it down, so then they have to be like, oh my gosh, we have 1,000 different subcontractors. Like, what CUI do they have? It gets very, so then they're just like, no, all you have to be CMMC level 2. Well, that's probably wrong, right? So that's why we're in this predicament, but I think it's a really hard problem to solve, actually. And I think the problem might be too hard to solve, that they'll just come up with a thing that just is like an easy button because they have no way to solve the real problem.
I mean, that makes sense. If they don't have a good solution in place right now, I totally respect the idea of making it easier to get organizations into that system so that there are wider opportunities, better solutions, so on and so forth. So like that absolutely makes sense to me. My concern is that this is where I'm going to hold like the idiot ball here, because it's been like 20 years since I had to be anywhere near CMMC or contractors. But if I'm looking at like, it is not necessarily just the access to that unclassified information, but the mechanisms that contain and control it. So again, speaking very clearly, like I don't understand what controls are in place right now or what are required. But if I'm looking through the lens of like traditional cybersecurity, supply chain attacks are a huge pain in the ass. So like, it is not necessarily them getting the unclassified information, but if a threat actor is getting in and has access to that, it's not just the mishandling of information, but if someone, an outside third party, a nation state, whoever is coming in, maybe that is part of their end call, but like they're in the system. So if these controls, part of the CMMC process, would prevent and reduce that, that is where I'm saying we need all the resistance and the pain, because if they get through not just to the unclassified information, they're getting access to other systems and they can get through other systems. And yeah, so it's just like another entry point. And supply chain attack and third party risk is obviously an entirely different, but difficult thing to solve for. So I think that is my only like real counterpoint here, is like, it's not necessarily even just the prize at the end of the tunnel. It's like, what happens if someone else gets into that system?
Yeah. Remember, they still are supposed to be implementing these controls, but that's the whole reason the assurance mechanism of CMMC was created, because they were going in and doing their own audits and finding out that people weren't actually doing this and lying about
exactly
their security posture. In SPURS, right? You have to submit your score and do a self-assessment, right? Self-assessment doesn't work. I mean, we know that. I mean, My job, my work, I wouldn't even exist as a person if self-assessment was allowed. It's my whole world, right? Of course, I'm for third-party audits, but I'm also like for like reasonability and being practical about it. But yeah, self-assessment doesn't work. It won't work. So I agree with you. I mean, like they need something. I'm just like, in my, like, logically speaking, I mean, if we really, why are we taking 7 years to do this and then delaying it? Like, I mean, like, I know it's government, I know, but like, and I know administration change and all that stuff, but like, if it was really about cybersecurity, we would have done like a crawl, walk, run approach, right? And I think they tried to do that, but not really. Like, I think there was a problem. They did like phase 1 self-assessment, phase 2, but to me, the problem is the requirements. Like 800-171 is the reason. If they're still going to require 800-171 and all those controls, I don't care if there's assurance or not. Like the only thing that, right, I don't care if you have an audit or not. You're still supposed to be doing it. So that, like, if you're investing in implementing 800-171, that cost is still a problem too, whether you have to be audited or not, if you're actually doing it, right? So the problem is the requirements are too hard and too difficult for small businesses to do, and they can't find an ROI to actually do it. And they don't have the expertise to do it because they have to hire third parties to help them and MSPs and all this stuff, right? I think the requirements need to change. Like, if we want to do this the right way and actually do what you say, then we need to find the 20 most important requirements for small businesses and say, that's what you need to do. Once you master that, okay, now there's 20 more you need to do. But you can't just, all right, everybody, 800-171, every single control. Good luck, everyone. That's what they did, right? Yeah. The requirements never change. If they're going to keep the requirements the same, which they are, because changing those requirements and all those contracts would take another 7 years, right? So, like, how do you solve that problem if the requirements are what they are, right? For small businesses, like that's the burden. The audit was just an assurance mechanism that added on to it. But if you're doing it the right way, the requirements are the burden. So,
well, maybe that'll be the outcome of this 60-day pause.
If it happens, though, now we're at like another 7 years, I think.
I don't know. Well, I feel like they have to, like, traditionally government has to cook in a lot of time to allow the market to be able to adjust and prepare. I don't think the current folks in place see that as a blocker, if I took a wild guess.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, I think that's a wrap. I think we covered it.
Yeah, we'll find out. I mean, like, right now, yeah, it is all question marks until some sort of additional communication guidance comes out. I think the net positive that we're looking at is it gives more time for organizations to prepare if they want it. The others are sort of going to be in a holding pattern. But the main thing is, for the love of God, keep your controls in place, keep investing in cybersecurity. And that is our
the moral story is at least do basic cyber hygiene, right? And cyber controls. Like, if you haven't done MFA, please just implement some type of MFA somewhere, everywhere. Okay, it doesn't have to be amazingly, you don't need like pass keys everywhere and everything, but like, at least minimum MFA, like the bare minimum, right? You gotta do something. So that's it. That's all I got.
All right. We'll see you next time, people. And hopefully Kendra will be here. See ya.
Thank you for listening to GRC Uncensored, the podcast, where Troy and Kendra know their shit, and our producer just talks shit. To learn more about GRC, go to grcuncensored.com, subscribe to our newsletter, or join our community on Reddit. Viewpoints expressed during the show do not reflect the brands, employers, or companies of our hosts, guests, or sponsors.